Hello and welcome to All 32. My name's Arabia, and here we talk all things football. Couple things. Number one, I'm juicing. New Year's resolution is to get this body together, so you might see me sipping on this thing throughout the episode. Don't ask me what's in it. Some combination of like celery, spinach, apple, lemon. I kind of just juice and go. I've been doing it for like 4 days now, so I don't follow a specific recipe. I just kind of put things together in front of me. Another thing, my son is in the other room playing college football 25. So if you hear somebody absolutely going crazy, that's what it is. I also live on a lake. I'm going to show you. But there are these ghetto ass geese that live right outside of my window. And I looked it up. They mate around this time. So at night, sometimes during the day, they are just so loud because they're fucking outside of my bedroom window.
A lot are just sleep.
They've already started. I don't know if you can, it's a lot of them, but I'm behind these trees right now. I'm laying in the bed by my lonesome, and they outside getting it on, loud as hell, eating, shitting. It's a mess. So we got a lot going on today. Not just in my house, but also in the NFL. We have a few things to talk about today, so sit tight. We have to talk about the coaching carousel and Ezekiel Elliott and grabbing dicks. Yes. Yes. Grabbing dicks, unfortunately. It's getting weird. All right. First and foremost, before we get into Wildcard weekend, let's talk about some things happening around the NFL. Starting with Daron Payne. During the Commanders game versus the Cowboys over the weekend, there was a personal foul that Daron Payne acquired. Take a look at what Cowboys Center Brock Hoffman did.
Grab his dick and twist it!
Oh my god, dude, this is an MMA fight, dude. This is
You
too much.
twist that dick!
Twist his dick!
That's weird. You're being weird. Why are you grabbing dicks? Not only did you grab it, you're trying to like twist it and you look like you're trying to fondle it. You're being weird. You know, a lot of times I try to provide an out and say sometimes things aren't what they appear to be. I don't know what you were up to, and I know it's a lot of things that happen during the game that we don't see and that we don't hear. But this was weird. I would have threw a punch too. I'd take the flag before I ever let you play with me like that. So Hoffman, stop being weird. Next, let's get to the coaching carousel, which tends to happen around this time of year when teams are looking ahead if their season is over and they want to clean up their act a little bit and see if they can hire and fire and figure things out. So before we get to the 6 head coach vacancies that there are in the NFL right now, let's get to some coordinators who unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, lost their jobs over the last few days. The Browns fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, after just one season. The Bengals fired their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. The Colts fired their defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley, after 3 seasons. Pause. Let me tell you about what I thought about the AFC South in the offseason because I was wrong. I thought the AFC South would be way more interesting than it turned out to be. I thought it would be kind of what the NFC West is, where the NFC West isn't the best division of football, but they're very competitive within each other. I thought the AFC South would be that. I thought maybe the Texans would win it, but between the Titans and the Colts and the Jaguars, I thought that they would be kind of like tussling it out for second or third and just be closer. But clearly we see that didn't work out. So now let's get to head coaches. Before we get to the firings, let's talk about who's retaining their head coach. The Giants are actually holding on to Brian Daboll, which is kind of surprising, kind of not, because I get the same vibe from some Giants fans. We're like, some Giants fans really like Brian Daboll. You know, he was once coach of the year in the NFL. They want to keep a hold of him and just build their roster better. And there are other people who don't like him. They want to throw him out the window. So kind of surprised, kind of not that they are holding on to him. But, you know, I wouldn't say he's like coach of the year, best coach of, you know, in the NFL. But also it's like kind of what else are their options? What else would they do at that position? So we'll see. They're also holding on to GM Joe Schoen. Of course, these two gained a lot of interest in the offseason during Hard Knocks when they had conversations about who they should keep. Should they keep Saquon or should they keep Daniel Jones? Of course, they ended up keeping Daniel Jones. That fell flat. Saquon goes to the Eagles and just absolutely performs amazingly, stellarly. And that's another conversation we have to have too. Why? You do realize that if Saquon was on the Giants would not have been this like 10-win team. And you do realize that Saquon would not have had the season that he's having now had the Giants kept him. It's almost like not a win-win because the Giants did lose from losing him. And he would have probably won them a few more games than they did win. But Saquon would not have had the season that he did if he was on the Giants. The Eagles have an incredible O-line, and this is what we have to understand about the O-line. We talk about the O-line a lot of times like it's one thing because it is one unit. It's 5 individuals coming together to kind of make one fist type of thing. But the O-line is super important when it comes to a run game. If you have these tackles or guards who are pulling to create openings and aiming points for your running back and really creating those, setting up situations where your running back has room or they're kicking out or whatever, that is so important. And so we can't underestimate the power of a good O-line. Compare the Giants O-line to the Eagles O-line. And that is one huge reason why the Saquon has been put in such a better position to succeed. So I just don't like this narrative of like, oh, had the Giants kept Saquon, they would have been much better. No, they wouldn't have. They would have probably won more games, but he wouldn't have had this crazy season where he's almost breaking Eric Dickerson's, single season rushing record. So, okay, another by the way, you know me, I can talk all day about football. Another by the way, I think it's amazing that these players are getting 1,000 yards and plus whatever. But of course, it is way more impressive that these players who did it before, who still have the record, Eric Dickerson, for example, were doing it in fewer games. But to balance that out, it's like they weren't passing as much. It is a way more of a passing league now. So to get those rushing records or even close to the rushing records, I think is still impressive because we're in a totally different league now. So I heard people kind of hating and being like, oh, well, the ones who came before him did it in less games. But it's also like the game is different. So if it's a passing league now, if you get rushing stats, then that says a lot about you and your team. And I think it's impressive. So, okay, head coaches. The Jaguars, of course, fired Doug Peterson. The Patriots fired Jared Mayo. During the season, the Jets fired Robert Saleh. The Bears fired Matt Eberflus. And the Saints fired Dennis Allen. Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce was also fired today. He was the interim head coach at the end of 2023-2024 season. This season was his first full year as official head coach. They did fire him, so we will see what happens in Las Vegas as well. So as of right now, the Jets have requested to interview Saints interim head coach Darren Rizzi. They also interviewed Rex Ryan. So we will see how that develops in New York. The Patriots interviewed Pep Hamilton, who was a longtime NFL assistant. He was OC for the Texans in 2002. He also was head coach for the DC Defenders, which was an XFL team in 2020. The XFL and the USFL merged, which is now the UFL. But Pep Hamilton was a favorite in the DC area. They ended up winning the championship. So Pep Hamilton is kind of up for the Patriots job. They also interviewed Byron Leftwich, who was an offensive coordinator for the Bucs. The Bears requested an interview with Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady. Very interesting. And the Jaguars have requested interviews with Joe Brady, Todd Monken, Kellen Moore, Ben Johnson, Robert Saleh, Patrick Graham, Liam Cohen, and Aaron Glenn. So those are people who the Jaguars have requested interviews with. Do you think Robert Saleh will have a head coaching job this upcoming season? Because a part of me really doesn't. A part of me feels like, unfortunately, the optics or the reputation or whatever was tainted not just by the Jets not performing well, but maybe because of more of a social or kind of aspect with Aaron Rodgers and things not working out there. But maybe some organizations are able to look past that and be like, look, Aaron Rodgers is kind of a jerk. He's kind of a diva. So I wouldn't be surprised if he butt heads with him and, was part of the reason why he left. But I think there are better options out there right now for these head coaching positions. Again, there are 6 available, so he could certainly land one. But in my mind, I just see him going to a coordinator position, kind of like Cliff Kingsbury went from head coach of the Cardinals to then a coordinator, or even Dan Quinn went from head coach of the Falcons to a coordinator, just to stay in the league and make his impact on the team. I can see him being more of a coordinator than I can as a head coach, but maybe it's me. Maybe it's just me. Also, Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores said that he will take every interview requested. The Vikings defense, I think, is one of the unsung heroes of the NFL. Of course, they got more notoriety as the season went on, but nobody was really talking about the Vikings defense because the star of that show has been Sam Darnold. Who expected Kirk Cousins to leave, go to the Falcons? Sam Darnold steps up. Of course, they also had J.J. McCarthy, but Sam Darnold comes in and surprises most people. The Vikings surprise most people, not just offense and defense, but just their level of play and consistently 14-2 coming into that Lions game and fighting for the number one spot in the NFC North, the hardest division in football. Very impressive. I didn't see it coming. And so, of course, with that Vikings defense, the defensive coordinator would then garner a lot of interest for one of these head coaching positions. So we will see how that turns out. We've also seen coordinators kind of stay put. We saw it last season with Ben Johnson, who, of course, is with the Lions, and a lot of people wanted him for their head coaching positions, and he was like, no, I'm just going to stay put and see how far we can go, and I can respect that. Same with Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick with the Texans, people asked him and interviewed him, and he ended up just staying where he was. So I think, in some regard, people really do want to stick with it and see how far their team can go, especially if you're, like, building momentum. But at some point, I do think that the Ben Johnsons of the world and the Bobby Slowicks of the world will end up getting a head coaching position, and we will see how that affects their former teams. That's enough of coaching for now. We definitely will revisit the topic. It's just going to build and build as more people are interviewed and fired and hired, so we'll get back to that at some time. My God, my son is in there going crazy. You know, he had the game set to All-American. My son is 5. He had the game set to All-American, came in the room crying. I looked at the settings. I'm like, bro, you're doing this to yourself. You better put that thing to freshman and stop playing. He was like, oh. They have to experience it. If they don't experience actual gaming failure, I mean, yeah. I don't let him win. And I'm like, just build it from the ground up, son, because you starting on All-American is crazy. Now, Ezekiel Elliott garners gains notoriety with Dallas. He ends up leaving, goes to the Patriots, falls flat there, comes back to Dallas. The Cowboys try this weird running back by committee thing with Zeke and Rico Dowdle, and it just doesn't work. Rico Dowdle ends up being RB1. And so now, Dallas purposefully left an out for Zeke for him to seek out a playoff team. And that's exactly what happened. The Chargers picked up Ezekiel Elliott and signed him to the practice squad with the hopes that he will, rest, recover, and then maybe work his way up. I hate to say this, and I want to phrase it in a way that's not so negative, but I think Zeke is done. And I think, of course, his best days are behind him. Do I think that he's like, I hate the word washed, but I do think that he has something left in him. I do hope that he lands somewhere that he is healthy and works the best for him and his family and his situation. Like, I wish the best for him. But I think Zeke's best days are behind him. And I think we have seen all that we are going to see as far as the glory of Zeke. I think he can be a productive member of a running back room. He's not a 3-down back. He'll come in there, do what he needs to do a few times, maybe give RB1 a rest. So we will see. Will he change the tide for the Chargers in this playoff run? Absolutely not. And I don't think he's expecting to. I don't think anyone is expecting him to. I think he's there for, just to kind of see what they have and what he can do. So that's interesting. We'll see what the Chargers do in the postseason with Ezekiel Elliott. Next, the Titans. The Titans have locked up the first round pick in the 2025 NFL draft, which is especially interesting given that they fired their general manager, Rand Carthen. So now we look at a Titans team that needs to fairly quickly hire a GM so that they can start to get the ball rolling before the draft. And we also look at a situation where the Giants won a game. Why are you winning games? And that's not to say like you should have your players go out there and purposefully tank. I think that's very dangerous, not just physically because that's how you get hurt, half-ass playing, but also because you don't want that kind of mentality in the locker room. Like, you want your players locked in. I don't care if we won 0 games and we're 0-16 in this last game. I'm going out there and I'm giving it my all. So that's the kind of mentality that you want in your locker room. But just as a fan, I'm not a Giants fan, but just as a fan, I can imagine it being like, bro, why are we winning this game? Because that's how I felt as a Commanders fan last season, 2023. We were like kind of tied with the Jets in one game, and we put in Jacoby Brissett instead of Sam Howell, and we were about to win. I'm like, what are we doing? We have the second pick in the draft locked up, and we're about to drop because we want to win games for what? We have 4 wins in the season. That's good. Let's keep it at 4. But not the Giants. We'll talk more about the draft as we get closer to March, April. So now it is time for Wild Card Weekend. We're just going to go over the Saturday lineup. The first game on Saturday is Chargers-Texans. They are in Houston at 4:30 Eastern Time. The thing about these two teams is they are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum as far as penalties go. As far as against count, the Chargers are top 5 in penalties. They don't really beat themselves. They are very disciplined. They don't get a lot of flags against, and that's a great thing. On the other hand, the Texans are bottom 6 in penalties against. So they tend to get a lot of penalties and lose a lot of yardage and put themselves in long situations where they have to now play catch up. So you may think that this is kind of a small, insignificant thing, not a huge point, but in a win or go home situation like the postseason, in a game of inches, you cannot give the other team anything, and you don't want to beat yourself. If you do lose, you want it to be because the other team beat you, not because you beat yourself. The Chargers defense is solid, especially in the red zone. They're a 3-point favorite right now. They gave up an NFL low 301 points. The Texans, ironically, gave up 372 points, and they also scored 372 points. So exactly even as far as how many points they gave up and how many points they scored. I'm taking Harbaugh West to lead the Chargers to their first playoff win under his tutelage. My prediction is 24-13 Chargers, but don't sleep on the Texans. Do not sleep on the Texans. Postseason football is different, and attitudes are different, situations are different. The way that teams play in the playoffs, typically, especially for better teams, is different than the way they would play in the regular season. So I wouldn't just write the Texans off. I do think it'll be a fairly close game. Like, I don't think it'll be a blowout, nothing like 40-12. I don't think it'll be that. But I do have the Chargers winning. But if you have the Texans, it's not ridiculous. Don't let anybody make you feel stupid for that. Next up, we have Steelers-Ravens, Saturday night. Been waiting all day for Saturday night. Low-key, I think if I really put my mind to it, I think I could sing. I got to figure out a song. Next episode, I'm going to figure out a song to sing, but I'm pretty sure I have vocals. Yeah. Stay tuned. Okay, so these two teams split this year. They split this year. Ravens won 1, Steelers won 1. The game is in Baltimore. I have the Ravens. I think somehow they use their home field advantage to pull the win out. Since Christmas 2016, these two teams have played 17 times. Of those 17 times, the Steelers have won 12 times. The Steelers also lead the all-time series in wins and losses between the two teams since they very, very first started. So the Steelers in general do have the advantage. They have, of course, the Lamar rules where Lamar just looks totally different with them. They're extremely patient with those rush lanes. They hold him to passing yards as well. It's not just rushing. They hold him to passing yards. I believe they held him to 207 passing yards this season. So they play each other very, very hard. So that 34-17 win that the Ravens got when they just played was very unusual, not just because Baltimore won, but because of the margin of victory. Typically, the Ravens don't win by that. Typically, they don't beat each other by that much. The margin of victory is usually much, much smaller. We're talking 1 point, 3 points, maybe 7 points, usually something in that ballpark. But a 17-point differential is super unusual. So we will see if the Ravens carry that momentum. The Steelers are on the opposite side of the momentum. They lost the last, 4 or 5 games. Kind of looking like, not to the same magnitude, but like the Eagles kind of finished the season really, really bad last year. The Jaguars finished the season really, really bad last year. And unfortunately, the Steelers did have a really, really bad last quarter of the NFL season. So we'll see how they adjust. And pick themselves up and play their rivals in the first round of the playoffs. It should be a really, really good game. I will be tuned in. Like I said, we will continue to talk about the coaching carousel, and we will talk about more playoffs. I'll be back to talk about the Sunday lineup, don't worry, and also that Monday night game that's going to happen. But let me know, who do you have in Texans Chargers? Who do you have in Steelers Ravens? What are some of your New Year's resolutions? Let me know what you want to see. And I'll see you next time.